Good evening, everyone. Once again, it is time for Ghost Stories with Kitten. So sit back, relax, and enjoy true, real paranormal tales read to you by a human, not AI. Encounters on rural Midwest roads. I don't usually post stuff like this, and I'm not really a big paranormal guy, but there are two moments from my life that have stuck with me over years. Both happened in the same general area in the rural Midwest, and both still give me chills when I think about them today. 1. The Misty Fisherman. One night, I was in a car with 3 friends, just cruising some back roads near a river. This was a popular stretch for local teens. The road went from a straightaway into a series of tight, winding turns, the kind of spot where you'd have to slow way down and be very careful. As we were entering one of those turns, I saw something in the road. It looked like a misty figure, almost translucent, but I could clearly make out what looked like a fishing vest and a pole. I walked right in front of our car. We drove straight through it. At first I didn't say a word. I thought maybe I imagined it. But a few seconds later, one of my friends suddenly said, "Tell me you guys saw that." And we all freaked out. The chills hit all of us at once. Not one of us could explain it, but we all saw the same thing. To this day, I think about that spot. It was exactly where someone could have been hit by a car, right where the road turns unexpectedly. 2. The shadow at the cross. The second time I was alone, I was driving down gravel roads, cutting through cornfields, smoking a cigarette, and talking to my girlfriend on the phone. It was late, quiet, and dark. From a distance, I noticed what looked like a lamppost with something near it. But I didn't think much of it at first. As I got closer, I realized there was a shadowy figure standing behind the pole. It wasn't just a trick of a light. It was darker than anything else around it, like it absorbed the darkness itself. The figure looked like it was watching the area, scanning its surroundings. It gave off the feeling of being aware, not just passively being there. It wasn't ever fully visible, but I could make out the outline of what looked like a long coat or trench coat and a wide-brimmed hat. Not quite a cowboy hat, more something you might see out of Crocodile Dundee. Just an impression, but an unmistakably human-shaped one at that. That strange sense of presence hit me hard. Then I saw it. Right at the base of a lamppost, a cross and some flowers, clearly a roadside memorial, and as I passed by, the radio kicked on "Don't Fear the Reaper" by the Blue Oyster Cult. The timing was unreal. The presence by the light pole felt very different from that of a fisherman. While the first encounter was eerie and surreal, this one had a much darker and much more ominous vibe. There was a heavy, almost oppressive feeling in the air, like I was intruding on something I wasn't meant to see. The figure by the memorial didn't just appear, it lingered, and it felt like it knew I was there. The whole energy of that moment was unsettling in a way that stuck with me long after I drove past. I've never had the chills that intense in my life. The image of that figure, half hidden in the shadows, darker than the night itself, has stayed with me ever since. I think about going back just to see if that cross is still there. Strange encounter. South Central, WI. WI. I'm going to guess, is that Wisconsin? If you're listening to this, perhaps you can let me know in the comment below which state is WI in America. The weekend of 10/11/24, my friends and I set out for a camping trip in Lake Kegonsa State Park, located in Stoughton, WI. While finishing up some geocaching on a hiking trail near the outhouses, we encountered someone strange. You can enter the trail after crossing the path of another trail that enters the forest. The trail we were on circled to a prairie that laid in the middle of the trail and was surrounded by forest. The sun was low in the sky. It had to have been roughly 6 p.m., and the sun was just above the tree line as we started our hike. As we were at our last geocache of the night, the sun had just gone behind the tree line and it was beginning to get dark, but we could still see without the assistance of flashlights. The forest went silent. No more sounds of the bugs around us or birds that had been active all day. It approached us with a whistle, a bone-chilling whistle. Our entire group went silent, and no one said a word, until we heard a second whistle. This second whistle was more broken up than the first, but, in the slightly tipsy state that I was in, I thought it had to have been a human whistle, as it was not perfect, and to that I responded with a pretty stern "hello?" hoping for an explanation as why our group got whistled at twice. "I thought you were dogs," a voice said as it rounded the trail towards us. He passed our group. I noticed I could not make a face out on this person, but chalked it up to nerves and being distracted and tipsy. As a group, we agreed, while it was a strange encounter, we should not panic, but took it as a sign that it was time to get off the trail. This is where it gets even more weird. All 4 of us in the group kept our eyes peeled for anything as we made our way back to the car, when suddenly this creature, calling it a creature, as surely it was not human, suddenly appeared on the edge of the trail closest to the woods, staring blankly to the field in front of it, but would have been to our right. And in the flattest, driest tone, it said, "Who's that guy?" Everyone in our group kept walking as I answered, "The same guy from earlier?" I assumed it was talking about my boyfriend who was behind the group. We had never been so silent on the walk back to the car. Checking behind our shoulders and checking our surroundings constantly, we made it back to our campsite, where we decided, due to the time of day, it would be best to wait to pack up until morning. While we were debriefing our experience, I told my friends how neither encounter I could make out a face on this person. Being a female hiker, I made a point to gather some facial features of anyone I ran across on the trail, as a just-in-case. No one in our group could identify a face, and in our own ways, we described how the face of this thing was not even a human face at that. It seemed to almost have a blurred effect over what should have been a human face. All of us saw the same thing. You could tell where the eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, but there was none on this creature. Being that it whistled and was unidentifiable, we are convinced to have encountered something like a skinwalker. They are just not relevant in that area of Wisconsin. It was Wisconsin. It was a long night at the campsite, with the impending feeling of being watched. I'm spiritually inclined, and feel I took the necessary steps to protect our campsite for a secured night's sleep. But I have had a strange encounter since. I'm willing to explain the encounters I had since that night if asked here on Reddit. Any ideas? It does sound to me, narrator here, that could indeed have been a skinwalker. Certainly sounds like it. Basement presence. When I was in high school and into my 20s, I was living in my parents' basement, fully finished, like a little apartment of my own. I would be playing N64, and down the hallway towards the bedroom and bathroom was a dark hallway, and every once in a while I just got the feeling that I was being watched. I would look down the hallway, and nothing was there, but still that feeling like I was being watched. After months of this, it got more intense. When I started coming home from parties and going to sleep down there, I'd be sleeping on my stomach, and I'd be woken up from a drunk sleep by what felt like a person sitting on the edge of my bed. The bed would depress, and I would literally roll towards them, and it would shock me awake. This happened for 2 years, about twice a week. Whoever they were, they never made a noise. They just watched me sleep, I guess. I don't know if it was maybe my grandfather who had passed 8 years prior, or someone, maybe the previous owner. But I still remember it to this day, and that was over 20 years ago now. God, has it been that long, says I, remembering playing my N64 as a kid. That is how long it's been, folks. From a millennial here. Anyway, on to the next story. I don't like the dark. This experience happened last night when I had to go and check on our rental property, about an hour away. My wife got a notification about 10 p.m. that there was a movement detected from the cameras we set up in the rental property to keep an eye on the place until we could get it rented. My wife asked if I could go over there to make sure everything was okay and locked up. I told her to text me if any more notifications came through, rather. I pull up around 11:30 and can see there's a light coming from the basement. Already on edge, I walk around the outside and check the windows and doors. All are shut and locked. My wife called me in and asked if I'd gone inside yet because she got another movement detected in one of the bedrooms. I told her I was just unlocking a door to go check inside, but really didn't want to. Maybe the camera detected me outside the window. I just said this to make myself somewhat feel better. I open the door and yell, "Anyone in here? I already called the police. They'll be here shortly." I listen for anyone moving around, but I hear nothing. I check all the rooms and find nothing, so I head down to the basement, at least to turn off the light. I walk into the basement and see the cord for the light swinging by itself. But only that light. There is no air movement. I do a really quick search to check for anyone hiding, for I turn the light on my phone and pull the cord. The moment it turns off, I hear a loud bang upstairs. I run up the stairs to get out the basement quickly. The basement stairs are right next to the front door. I go out the door and start shutting it. I hear a voice come from the basement. "I don't like the dark. Please stay." I hopped back in my vehicle and I turned it on. As I pull out the driveway, I see the basement light turn back on. I call my wife and tell her I'm on my way home. She said, "Get another movement detector message," right as I called her. And that story, that is where that story ends, but it's strange because it feels like there should be more to that, so maybe they're going to be writing more in the future. Hearing screaming and growling. Hey y'all. So, this one's kind of a 2-in-1 post, since one of the incidents was pretty small, but enough to make me want to share it with you. Story 1. We're in a different house from my previous experiences, and I was up late with my stepsister, who was visiting for the summer with my stepbrother. I'd say I was about 15, and she was 12. It was maybe around midnight, and we decided to have a spa night. So we gathered a bunch of random toiletries from the bathroom, started making and applying face masks, and put on some relaxing spa music to fit the mood. At one point, the music on her phone stopped. The phone was still on and open, but the video was paused. We looked at each other when it turned off and both gave a "turn it back on" look to each other until we heard something else. There was a deep growling noise that seemed like it was coming from under the bed. We have dogs, but this was not a dog growl. It sounded like a human making a growl noise. It was deep, but a loud growl. My stepsister and I didn't break eye contact throughout the duration of the sound, looking for reassurance that we both, in fact, had heard it. We quickly put all our supplies away and ended our spa night. My mum and stepdad have continued to see small things here and there. Some incidents are worse than others, mainly with my mum. This next one is my most recent incident of something that may or may not have been a paranormal experience, but the way it happened had me convinced that it was. This was maybe 2 years ago, in the same house as the growling incident. It was about 6:30 in the morning. Mum drives me back to work in the mornings, so we were just both awake and doing our normal morning routines, getting ready to leave. As I got my shoes on, my mum and I both heard it. It was a scream coming from outside that literally echoed throughout the entire neighborhood. It was a scream like I had never heard in my life. It sounded like a mixture of a mountain lion or a woman screaming at the top of her lungs. It almost sounded like a wounded animal that was screaming for help. This was even scarier for us at the time, as our cat had gone missing a few days prior. My mum went outside to investigate and told me to stay inside, in fear of me seeing our cat dead. But when she opened the front door, the screaming stopped. It was as if it had never happened at all. When she came back to tell me that she didn't see anything, it started again. All I could imagine was our cat being hurt and screaming out in pain for help, but it was too loud to be any kind of house cat. We both went outside this time, and the same thing happened. It was silent. The sound started again, and once we came back inside to grab the car keys and leave. Once we left the house, we didn't see or hear anything out of the ordinary, and I had a normal day at work. This was my latest and hopefully last paranormal experience. My mum has stories for days. Let me know if you would like to hear any of those. Narrator here, I certainly would, and may I just say, I think it was very rude of that ghost to disrupt your spa night. This happened to me when I was 5. I'll start this by saying I'm actually quite skeptical about paranormal activity. But yeah, this happened to me when I was 5 years old. I'm now 39. My mum told me what happened when I was 18. She said she didn't want to tell me when I was younger in case it traumatized me. My dad told me the exact same story when I was 21. My parents split up when I was 10 years old. They did not keep in touch, and if they did, it would be to conspire to terrify me, or rather, it wouldn't be to conspire to terrify me. So I don't know, perhaps there is something in it. I kind of remember certain things, as if it were a dream, but I don't remember all of it. As I mentioned, when I was 5, we had just located to a small town in the UK. In the town was an abandoned airfield, and our house was located at the edge of this. On the other side was marshland for miles. It was a pretty isolated location. The house was one of 4 or 5 that were converted from a large barn. Being a small town, my mum would meet people and they would instantly know that she wasn't from there. They'd start asking questions which inevitably led to her explaining that she had just moved to the area. Once they found out exactly where, they would get a bit twitchy. My mum eventually asked someone if they were okay, and they explained that the house is cursed. The outcasts from a town used to go there to practice dark magic back in the olden days. I know, it's silly, right? But bear with me. Lo and behold, strange things did start to happen. We had 2 cats, and one time they both climbed up a wall in the house before turning and looking at me. I had an imaginary friend, a little boy. A few other strange things happened, but I will skip to the good bits. I sort of remember this part. To give you an idea of the layout, the house had a central front door leading to a downstairs lobby and a staircase in the middle. Upstairs was balconies on either side of a staircase leading to bedrooms. I was first on the right. I had a cabin bed in my room with wardrobes underneath. Most nights I would have recurring dreams about wolves chasing me through a forest. The dream would end at some point every night. One night it carried on past the usual ending point. I got out of the woods and turned, and then woke up with a jolt as the wolves were just about to pounce. Immediately after I woke up, a hand slammed itself against the edge of a bed frame. Scared, I hit it hard and felt like I made contact. A dark figure ran out of the room, through the closed doors, letting off a high-pitched scream. The next thing that happened was the worst. My mum put me to bed one night and went back downstairs. My dad was at work. A short while later, she heard screaming from my bedroom. She said it was like blood-curdling, fearing for life screaming. She ran upstairs. Our black dog, I don't remember what breed, kind of greyhoundy in its size and build, was sat outside the door as if trying to guard me. She opened the door and his screaming immediately stopped. Silence, except for one thing. In the middle of my room, all my toys were stacked on top of one another, way higher than I could have ever reached. At the top was a teddy bear that played a tune when you pressed on its stomach. And yep, you guessed it, that tune was playing. She looked in my bed, and I wasn't there. She searched the house, top to bottom, panicking, but she couldn't find me. She eventually went to the next-door neighbours to ask for their help, and search in the area took place. Eventually, I was found, in a bed, in a next-door neighbour's house, on the opposite side of the wall to my bed, and I was fast asleep. We moved out of that house the next day. We then rented a house to a family that owned a local Italian restaurant. One evening, it didn't take long, there was a knock at the door, and the man threw the keys into our house and said he won't step foot in there ever again. No other explanation. It turned out that the house was well known in the area, and in order for us to sell it, we had to have the house blessed before actually selling. My parents arranged for someone to come and visit the house, who could tell us more about it. They said there were 2 dark spirits, a young boy and a very, very dark spirit. The boy had been hiding from the dark spirit inside the house. I'm not sure what happened to the house after that, as we moved out of the area a couple of years later. I did happen to be working nearby a few years ago, and decided to drive to the house. I parked up at the end of the lane, looked at the house, and I swear I've never put my foot down so fast in my life. The feeling I got was just awful. A discussion I had with my resident today shook me up. I work in an assisted living home for those with dementia. Today, I was sitting with a resident in her room who was in the very early stages of her dementia. She said she wanted to talk to me about a few things, so I agreed, and she began to tell a story of her past husbands. She started off the story by saying, "My last husband is dead, sort of." I asked what she meant, but she said she had to tell the whole story. A very long story short, she tells me of her past from an abusive and cheating husband or 2. She provided great detail, lots confirmed through internet searches and pictures. The story was over 40 minutes long. She finally starts to talk about her last husband. She said he had cancer and, in a time of depression, shot his face off but survived. Months later, it took his life. She said that they buried him, had declared him dead, and all that. But hours after the funeral, she is woken up by knocks on the house. She says it was her husband, covered in dirt. She rushed him inside and she was freaking out. She said he just went to the basement, where he had previously shot himself. She began telling her family members and they didn't believe her. She started bringing him food and water. This went on for months, until her daughter said, "That's enough, you're going to an assisted living home." However, once the daughter moved into her mother's house, she also saw her dad. Oh my God. Out of fear, she locked the basement up and told her mum she was right and that they should never discuss it. The resident then began tearing up, thinking about her husband is likely gone now, locked alone in that basement. This freaked me the hell out just hearing it. But also, she has early dementia, so maybe it's not true. So I asked her clarifying questions. Do you think he's still alive? Does anyone else know about this? Why didn't you call the police? How would the cemetery not know this? She answered all the questions by saying he was in fact dead, but his very physical and visible ghost-like body is still there. Before anyone questions this because of her dementia, 1, she's not usually like this. She's very early in the stages of it, has never told lies or delusions. 2, she stated and started the story by saying he was kind of dead, and then proceeded to tell a 40-minute detailed and evidence-based story with a timeline-like fashion. I have a master's in psych, and, perhaps there is, but I've never heard of stories like this, so detailed, so real, to be purely mental illness. 3, I've told this story way shorter than it actually was. The emotions, evidence, her story, all felt incredibly real. It also felt so evil. I'm an atheist, but have such an incredibly body reaction to this story that I actually said a prayer. It still felt haunting. Maybe people will try to downplay this or explain it in some way. But I am an atheist, and really not a believer in the supernatural. But, for some reason, this has completely shaken me up. I've seen it all the past 6 years working here. I know this resident, and I know her story was real. My friend Wyatt. So, I should probably preface this by saying that I've always believed in the paranormal. Ghosts and vampires, you name it, I believe in it. Anyway, I have a lot of experiences with the paranormal to back up this belief. One of the most prevalent is probably one of the first. I was 5 or 6 at the time, and my family lived in North Carolina. I don't remember where exactly at this point, because we moved a lot. However, my aunt and uncle lived by a rodeo that my uncle helped with, and every Thursday we would go down there to go to the rodeo. Their house and the rodeo was surrounded by woods. My brother's cousin and I would run in and out of them all the time. Now, what you need to understand is that at this time I was the youngest, and the annoying little sister/cousin. So I was always being left behind. My cousin had decided on this day that it would be fun to lead us into the woods and then lose me along the way. How rude. Which, to be honest, wasn't that hard to do. I've never been afraid of the dark or these woods. So I would lag, though we usually didn't go too far in either. This time, my cousin led us further in than we'd ever been before. My brothers and she had turned around at some point and left me there as per their plan. I was lost, tired, and honestly getting a little scared. There was a storm coming. You could smell it in the air. I was getting frantic. I eventually came up upon an old shack, which wasn't all that strange in North Carolina. Anyway, I went into the shack as the rain started to come down. Now, I must tell you here that I'm highly terrified of thunder and lightning. Me too. And that in my mind the storm lasted a bit longer than in actuality. Anyway, I huddled into this shack, terrified and alone. Suddenly, I hear a very thick southern drawl, a male voice asking me if I was okay and where my family was. Now, I haven't heard anything or anyone out in these woods, or seen anyone as I came into this shack. However, when I lifted my little tear-stained face, I saw what I can only describe as a Confederate soldier standing in the doorway of the shack. I wasn't afraid of him, as I probably should have been, but there was something comforting about him. I told him that my brothers and my cousin had disappeared, but I didn't know how to get back to my aunt and uncle's place. He nodded and said that he would stay with me till the storm gave up a bit, and then he would help me to find my way home. Oh, what a sweet ghost. Now, again, to a little girl of 5, this storm seemed to go on forever. I sat there talking to this person, and he told me his name was Wyatt. The storm started to let up, and the soldier led me to the edge of the woods, right to my uncle's house. My mum, aunt, uncle, and grandma were screaming my name. I could hear them as we came up to the edge, and so I screamed, "I'm here!" They all came running over to me as we walked to the edge, and they all started yelling at me, telling me not to follow my brothers and cousins into the wood any more. It just wasn't safe. I told them that I would be all right. This nice man had helped me out of the woods. They all looked at me dumbfounded. There was nobody there with me. I turned to look at the man, but he was gone. Now this couldn't have been or taken a few more seconds, and I had just seen him in the corner of my eye as I had turned. He had been waving at me, but yet there was nobody there. They told me to stop making up stories and stop lying to them. Wow, terrible, terrible parents, I'm just going to say that. To this day, most of them still don't believe me, and my mum tells me that I must have made a saviour for myself. But looking back on it now, I know he was there, and that I know I had seen a ghost. Wyatt, or whatever his name may have been, has seemed to follow me. I still, to this day, will see a Confederate soldier out of the corner of my eye. It may just be my mind trying to figure out who or what I saw that day over 2.5 decades ago. But Wyatt will always be a memory that I hold dear. Your narrator, Kitten here, I think that was a fantastic story, probably one of the best ones I've heard in a long time, and I absolutely believe you and that ghost helped save you and get you home that day. Good job, Wyatt, if you're listening. A whisper in my ear. Hello, everyone. I would like to share my encounter that I had in Ecuador, in the city of Cuenca, to be exact. My mum, my sister and I always stay at my aunt's house. At my aunt's house, they have 3 daughters. Anyways, this one night, midnight I believe, I'm scrolling through my phone. Everyone is sleeping, and so I decided to go out to the bathroom and wash my face. Everyone's door is closed. For example, my aunt and uncle are sleeping in their bedroom. Their room is closed. My cousin is sleeping with her daughter. Her room is closed, and my other cousin is sleeping in her room, and her door also is closed. I turn on the light and start putting water on my face. Just water to rinse my face. Then, as I'm applying water to my face for the second time, about 5-10 inches from my ear, I hear my name in a whispery tone. Not too low of a volume. I would like to say the voice did a medium, loud type of whisper. The voice was that of a little girl, and she said my name in Spanish. Not even 1 second after I heard it, I looked up in the mirror and looked to my left, because I left the door open and immediately peeked out my head outside the bathroom and looked around, and nobody was there. I immediately shut the lights off and ran to the room where me and my mum and sister were sleeping, which had 2 beds in it. I could not tell you how confused I was, because I obviously heard stories of encounters, but I never thought I would experience one. This was really crazy to me, and it still is, because I can't explain what that voice was. You guys might say it was your cousin's daughter, but again, the doors were closed. It's a pretty old house, and the doors creak when open. Plus, it was 1 second after I heard my name. And you would have heard that creak again. I started to look to see if anyone was around me, but no one, no footsteps or someone running away, nothing, just darkness. Thank you for listening to my story. Childhood room. My childhood room was a renovated, once creepy old spare room. I was mortified to enter it before it was renovated, and even after it was, I never felt safe there. The weirdest thing was I used to sleepwalk every night for years from my top bunk to the side of my parents' bed and fall asleep, always around 3 a.m. The closet was the worst part. It always felt a little bit more darker in there, if that makes sense. This became a habit, and my dad got concerned. One night I just felt like I couldn't be in my room anymore. It was around 11:30 p.m. My dad was still up watching TV in the living room, so I stood up and walked towards my parents' room. My dad caught me walking towards their room and said my name, followed by, "You need to face your fear, son. Get back to bed," and made me go back to my room. As I laid there in the bottom bunk, vibrating in an unexplainable fear, I saw a darkness, darker than a dark room around me, encapsulate the area around me. I tried to sleep, but after shutting my eyes I felt a forceful arm extend across me, almost as though an adult, sleeping person unconsciously extended their arm over me. I began to panic and ran into the hall. My parents immediately comforted me, and my dad was frozen in fear. I could tell he believed me, just the way he looked at me when I explained to him what I'd seen and felt. Later in life, I would have what I can only describe as waking dreams, moments I would sleep with my eyes open, and I still do, time to time. It is an otherworldly voice that says what may potentially happen and exactly what to do if it does happen, and every time I follow what it says, good things happen. I used to experiment and disobey it on purpose, only to have slightly bad things happen. Nothing major, though, more inconveniences. Anyway, I used to tell my dad, "Don't take this road," or "Don't leave the house because I see something bad happen," and after that night he began to believe me and follow exactly what I said. Me and my dad have never openly discussed this. It's more of a quiet understanding, and now I live on a different continent than him, and I doubt we'll never probably even acknowledge this again. It's just a weird memory I wanted to share with you. My ghost stories. My stories from Vale, or schools. So we've covered Wyatt, the greenhouse, and the White House. I promised that I would tell you about Vale, or schools. To be clear, I was only in grade school in Vale. Middle school was in Nisa, and high school was in Ontario. Every time I'm saying or, it's actually OR, which is obviously a state, not the word or, just to clear that up. Be that as it may, my brothers were both in the middle school in Vale, so I do have personal stories from there. Let's start, however, with my experience in Vale's grade school. I was already 8 when I moved to Vale from North Carolina, so I was starting out in 3rd grade. My first time ever entering school was a shock. I'm guessing it would have been to anyone who walked into their first day of school and saw burn victims. Only I could see them, however. My older brother is only a year older than I am, and I asked him if he could see them also. He thought I was losing my mind. He told me school was not the place to even think about such things. I can't say that he was wrong, but it was hard for me not to notice them back then. Me, being me, I befriended a school librarian. One day, I asked her about the history of the school, and yes, I'm also a history nerd. She told me that the high school used to be a grade/middle school, and the grade school we were there hadn't been there for some time. So, curious little me asked about what had been there before. Apparently, the land on which the grade school now stood had been a small hospital way back when. It had closed down after a horrific fire. Now, I don't know how true that is, but I did see a lot of burn victims in and around the school. That's just it, though. I didn't see any doctors or nurses, just the burn victims. So, whatever was there before had burned the ground at some point. The worst part about any of this was seeing a burn victim walk through the walls. A teacher, or even one of my classmates. I tried very hard to ignore them, and I was doing a great job of it until one of them, one of the scariest ones, noticed me watching them. He was not nice. Every day when I would get to school, he would be there waiting for me. He would follow me around and try to get me to talk to him, to engage with him. At this point, I knew better than to talk to any of them, especially when I was out in public. It was right after Christmas break, and he started to try and move things around me, and then screaming at me. I was terrified of going to school. My mum didn't understand why I didn't want to go. I will happily admit I loved school, but I was terrified of the burnt man following me around all the time. Now, at this time, my family was kind of Christian. We didn't really go to church or anything like that, but we did pray and what have you. So, one night, after a particularly scary day, I prayed that someone would come protect me from this evil that in my mind was a man. From then on, I would catch glimpses of someone or something keeping the other ghosts away from me. It wasn't until middle/high school that I realized it was the soldier who had saved me that time when I was 5. Narrator, I remember that story. Wyatt had made his return. I just didn't know it yet. And I was able to mostly block out the ghosts I did see. I would still see them, of course, hear them, and sometimes even smell them. But it got a little easier each time to ignore them. I had it almost fully under control by middle school. Ghosts are tricky things to deal with, let alone see, hear, and smell. So, sometimes I would slip and accidentally interact with one, thus dubbing me a freak and an outcast. Not many kids wanted to be seen hanging out with me, so Vale grade school was a very lonely time for me. Ghost and Witchcraft. They're Connected. An Introduction, Part 3. Greetings, it's me again, and it's been 8 months since I posted my first 2 stories to you guys. I must say, when I started these, I thought I would unload and upload back to back, but I don't know, life just got in the way, I suppose. Now, here I am again, and not much has happened over the past 8 months, other than the dreams of people trying to harm me and take from me, and one thing did happen, which made me realize that the ghost that I'd seen most of my life, keep in mind I'm 30 years old now, could have a tie to witchcraft. I don't know if it still ties into the ghost stories before, but they're important to tell in order, as these life stories to make sense. With that being said, this story will be the start of the witchcraft/ghost ties, and it comes to me today that I should tell it and state that the succubus versus me story will be the first of the witch's ghost. And again, I apologize for any lack of punctuations and grammar. You're welcome. I'll start now. If you read my succubus versus me story, then you already know what happened. But for those of you that haven't, in short, a succubus started visiting my fiancé in his dreams and trying to seduce him. Goodness. But I would always call out his name in the dream, and she'd change back into her shadow form, and then she'd hide in the corner. I also want to add a part of where 1/2 dreams he has of a succubus, she was keeping me away from him and trying to do things to me in his dream. Not sexual, but more like manipulation and magic. So I finally got fed up. I took a note from a jock who also had a ghost at his place, and he would, I can't say that on this stream, and then stuff would happen. Just an explicit word there, involving someone doing stuff by themselves in their bedroom. But I didn't have to do that since I had my fiancé to do it for me. So I just took it to a different level until he stopped dreaming about her. You go, girl. Well, doing one of these times, after not having any dreams, I've noticed a few things. 1, I stopped dreaming, especially after dreaming about the shadow figure/incubus who used to visit me in my younger years. He showed me a green mirror, without a mouth, spoke to me, saying something I don't remember in the first part. But the second part, he was leaving for good. 2, my body underwent changes. I got a little thicker in the belly. My chest had sag marks. I had a kid, so I thought nothing and told myself it's normal change in the body. Well, during the 8 months silence, I found out that someone has done a graveyard ritual on me and had also reversed it, and how do I know? Well, I moved on. My chest is no longer sagging, I'm happy to report. I did one exercise the next day, and they were full again. Okie dokie. I'm trying hard, guys, to read this story, but I am going to continue. I don't pre-read these stories in case anyone is wondering. I just do it live at first time, so I'm reacting as you are. I've also found that the one succubus was actually an ex-friend, especially since the 2-faced women in dreams are exactly the types of shade this friend would wear. And note, she's also a Gemini. Shocking. So maybe that's why the lady had a split face, and her style was kind of 90s, which this friend would have wore. as they're 15 years older than me. She's even stolen my wolf mask that I got from the Ren Fair, even kept my corset and a few other things I gave her to wear for the trip. Now, do I know this spell was cast? How do I know this spell was cast against me? Easily. I was steading, I think she means standing, in my living room, watching/getting ready to watch something on my PC one day, when I felt myself fall into the dirt, as well as seeing the dirt and worms all around me, and then this friend was wanting so much information out of me, when she felt like she was in trouble but wouldn't tell us why. But I knew from then, I don't know, something telling me as we spoke. She's known being haunted by whatever was haunting me, and what's bad is she isn't the first to send a ghost to me by doing witchcraft against me. I've had dreams. I even got footage/screenshots of my face being turned into two things, a yellow-eyed thing and a woman who, I'll let y'all know, she is in my next one. My 8 months hiatus really allowed me to put pieces together and cleared my mind, especially of all the ghost things that happened to me that I did not put on myself, and yes, I've had some hauntings myself. I'll give y'all a little treat and tell you a list of what's to come. 1. The 3-year-old missing school ID that appeared in a new house, in a new state. Many years with the incubus, the wolf man who saved me from bondage. The time I used the Ouija board experience, the man who walked the halls, shape-shifted slender man. The horned man in white flames, the dream with the blob, 3 witches and X, sex magic gone wrong. Mother, why did you chop my dog up? Dream, thank God. Okay, these are all real stories, and at the age of 30, I've come to terms with the unseen and the dream realm. I'm a true believer of ghosts and spirits. I also believe they can only manifest if you give it energy. All these things need a battery and a cord. So, what type of charge actually feeds these spirits, especially when you did not provoke any of these events? Funny, I come back, and that one doll, who I won't name, Drop, is on tour. What the hell? Which reminds me, the real ghost story part. I used to work a newspaper route in Kentucky, and that route would pass Bobby Mackey's Music World all the time. Very haunted place. It's no longer standing, but that place gave me the creeps, and I never felt wanted by it. Why would it want you, lady? I always felt like it repelled me. I could have sworn I'd seen a man one night, and after that night, I never dared. All right, that's the end of that story. Your narrator here. That was an interesting one. You know, I'm actually recording this right now mid through another episode. I'm roughly 48 minutes into that episode of my weekly ghost stories that I do. I think that story is so bizarre, it genuinely deserves to be its own story. And all I can say is that if you're the girl who was accused of doing the witchcrafts against this other girl and somehow she felt you'd done her wrong and all stuff, just believe me when I say I completely believe you're innocent. And that story was crazy. And it reminds me of a lot of people I used to know in my life. But remember, guys, just because you feel something about someone or imagine they're doing things to you doesn't necessarily mean that other person means you harm or is trying to hurt you. The night La Llorona tried to enter. My experience. The following is a real account of our experience in the rural coffee region of Colombia over the last several months. This all began in January, and it has taken us until very recently to uncover the full extent of the localized version of the legend surrounding La Llorona, and piece together the experiences that we have been having. We are thoroughly freaked out. We had just moved into our house, a secluded Finca, Finca, tucked into the hills near Rio Espejo, where the trees drip mist and the river never sleeps. It was the kind of place you imagine as peaceful, fertile, a place to start again. My partner was 4 months pregnant at the time, and we were excited but cautious, still adjusting to the rhythms and the land and the quiet. It started in the first week. Late at night, while we slept upstairs, her mother, brother and sister, who were staying with us at the time, began to hear something. A voice, a woman's voice, faint but urgent, floating in from just beyond the house. Iodami, help me. It didn't come every night, but it came enough, first once, then again, and then by the second week, they had heard it 3 times, always around midnight to 3 a.m., always when the night was heavy with fog and the river hummed louder than usual. They said it wasn't a scream, it wasn't loud, it was worse than that, it was soft, pained, and most of all, human. At first, they thought it was my partner calling for help from upstairs. After assuring them it wasn't her, they would look outside, thinking maybe someone was lost, maybe even hurt. But there was never anyone there. The trees stood still, and the night kept breathing, and the voice faded away. Then came the second week. That night, my partner began to have sudden and severe pain, cramping that felt like contractions. We were terrified. It was far, far too early for labor, and we didn't know what to do. We were upstairs, focused completely on her. For any reason I still can't explain, we didn't have our phones on us. They were downstairs, forgotten in the rush and the fear. We thought we had ridden it out. By morning, the pain had eased. We were exhausted, but relieved. Until we spoke to the security guard at the front gate of our conjunta residential. He asked us what happened the night before, and we said, nothing, why? And he told us, an ambulance came to your house around 1 a.m. Someone called from here, from your property, said there was a woman in distress. But we hadn't called anyone, and no one in the house had. Yet the ambulance had arrived, lights flashing, knocking at the gate. Because we didn't answer his call, the security guard refused to let them enter. After waiting, they turned around and left, very confused. We were simply stunned. That same night, the voice had been heard again by her family, closer this time, almost under the window again. Ayodame. It wasn't until we started asking around recently, neighbors, guards, even older people in the nearby town, that we finally began to understand and put all the pieces together. We were told very plainly, that is La Llorona. You live near the river now. Pregnant women, crying children and pain draw her in like blood in the water. But what's most terrifying to us is that here, in this part of Quindio, especially near the Rio Espejo and the La Tabiada, the stories go deeper. She doesn't just cry by rivers anymore. She doesn't just appear in white veils. They say La Llorona has learned how to use the modern world. There are stories of phones ringing and no one on the other end but hearing weeping. Baby monitors catching whispers. Emergency services receiving calls from homes where no one made them. And just like us, ambulances showing up to rural houses in the night, responding to a cry for help that no human ever gave. Some believe she's not just a spirit anymore, she's a pattern, a force that clings to sorrow and technology alike, a kind of ghost intelligence, using whatever tools she can to get past the walls of a home, to be let in. They say that if you respond to her voice, if you open the door, even out of kindness or confusion, you give her permission to enter. We didn't hear her that night. We didn't open the door, but she tried, and maybe, because we didn't answer, our baby is still safe, at least for now. Our daughter is 6 weeks old now, and she is still trying to get in. At least now we know what we are up against, and we can't wait to move away from the river. That was a great story. I absolutely loved that one. I loved the concept of her attaching herself to modern technology, that idea that maybe ghosts adapt with the times and that hauntings perhaps can change. Also, I apologize if I slaughtered any of the pronunciations of the words there. So, anyway. Alright, on to the next story. We never should have done this job. This story comes from a man in North Carolina. I picked up a job doing HVAC, which is heating and air. These were installations right after high school. I enjoyed the job, more so the people I worked with every day, as we were all like-minded. Didn't want to be here, and just wanted to go home to our families, or in my case, my dog. Not long after I graduated, my dad gave me an ultimatum. Go to school or get a job. Either way, you're not living off me in my house anymore. I knew it was coming. All my life, he'd been saying things like, when you're done with school, you're out of here, or you're going to be living like I did, independent, struggling to survive. My father had a rough life as a kid. His parents abandoned him, leaving him to his grandparents to raise. According to my dad, he would have much rather been left on the street, and that's about as much as he would tell me. Anyways, my mother wasn't around, so I'm sure she couldn't stand my dad early into the relationship. About 9 months to be exact. You connect the dots. It was about 1.5 years into my career. I was learning pretty damn fast, climbing the ladder from an apprentice to being assigned to a designated crew in no time. I was paired with a guy named James, a good man, but struggled with his moral compass sometimes, dealing with a split family and one of his own. The job in question started just like every other day. Go to the office, pick up the equipment for the day, chit-chat with the other guys, and then head to the job. It was a nice neighborhood, which was a relief, as the area we live in is 50-50 whether or not you're going to be jumped or tipped for your work. The house stuck out like a sore thumb, overgrown grass, decayed roof, destroyed decor in the yard, cracked concrete in the driveway from the tree roots growing under it, trees forming a vegetated tunnel over the driveway, and a detached garage that looked as if it hadn't been touched in 20 years. James looked at me. Of course we get this one shitty house, he said. Something felt off, I thought. Maybe their house broke and they can't afford anything other than the house payments and pulled a loan for this job. I wasn't sure, and honestly it didn't matter. We were here to do a job, get paid, and go home. Now, something that stood out to me immediately was that the windows were completely black, not tinted black, but solid black, no light in or out. I stayed at the truck as James greeted the homeowner. I look over at him as he knocked on the door, and within seconds she answered but wouldn't open the door. But maybe 4 or 5 inches open according to James. He came back to the truck and had an odd look on his face, one of confusion or maybe disgust, I couldn't tell. She said, "Meet her around the back," he said. This home was built on a very heavy grade, meaning the basement was a full size and easily accessible through a normal man door. James went around and I began getting tool bags to carry around. As I walked around the corner, I noticed coming from a detached garage that there was music. Maybe someone's in there working on a car or something, I thought. I sat James' tool bag down by the AC unit and went inside. Immediately, I got a chill down my spine. It felt cold and eerie. And there was this musty mildew smell that just filled up every corner of this basement. James had a scrunched up nose and squinted eyes, obviously displaying his disgust. The homeowner just went upstairs as I walked in. and I could hear her going up the steps. The basement was separated into two parts, a garage-type area where I was working, with a wall cutting it in half on the other side of a door. There was a full wall separating the garage area from the living room area, which we'll get into that in a little. I looked over at James as I sat my bag down and asked softly, "Don't you have the creeps about this place?" He looked at me and just nodded and went outside. It was time to start tearing everything out. Everything was going smoothly. I already put a new furnace in its place and started attaching the ductwork. There was a small fluorescent light that illuminated my workspace. Other than that, it was dark. I couldn't see past the light when I turned around, making the backdrop of the light completely black, making me feel as if I were in an interrogation room. I tried my best to stay focused. I went to cut a high-voltage wire and bam! Sparks flew and I jumped out of my skin. I could have sworn I turned all the breakers off. How could have I gotten the wires out of the old one without turning the breaker off? I mumbled to myself. Because I tripped that breaker, the one light I had turned off, I shot up and went to reset the main breaker. I flipped the breaker and the light came on. As I turned around, I froze. The homeowner was right there. This had been the first time I had seen her. She was pale. There was absolutely no colour to her skin. Around 5 foot tall, in her early 80s, maybe, and had wrinkly old skin that folded around her elbows and face like a Shar-Pei. Oh, that's the kind of dog, right? All I could get out was, "Hi?" She scared the absolute shit out of me. She didn't say a word. She was just hunched over a little and just looked at me, her eyes almost black. She grinned a little and turned away and went back upstairs. She made no sound as she walked, almost as if her feet weren't touching the ground. It spooked me. I had to take a break. I walked up to the van and sat down. "You good, bro?" James asked. "Yeah, I got to meet our customer." He just looked at me, eyes widened. "She's weird, isn't she?" he asked. I just raised my eyebrows in acknowledgement. I went back to work and got to a point I needed help with something and called our office to send a tech out to help us wire something up. It was around noonish, and I was ready to eat, so I ordered food off of DoorDash, as I don't like leaving the job to eat. I hung out with James until the food arrived. We both stopped and ate. The whole time, something felt off, like something was watching us while we worked. I felt like I could reach out and touch whatever it was, even though I couldn't see it. Our tech arrived right about the time we were finishing eating. His name was Arnold. Arnold was a religious man like myself, and we connected on that. We often talked over the phone or text about things going on in our lives, and what we could do to help ourselves with God. "What's up, guys? Didn't ask if I wanted anything to eat, did you?" he said. "We didn't know you were coming, or we would have," James said. Arnold was kidding, of course. He often used cliché humour. James stood up and started to brief him on what we all had left, and also mentioned our lovely customer. He described everything to him, like her appearance, our interactions with her, and the feeling we get when we go into the house. Arnold shook his head and claimed we were a couple of chickens, and that we were scared of an old lady. James shrugged and said, "Okay, well, when you meet her, you'll understand." Up until this point, she only spoke once, as far as I'm aware, and it was to James at the front door. I went inside to grab something. I think my wallet. I can't remember exactly, but something, and came out pretty quickly. Arnold looked at James and I and said, "Let's get this done. I've got a couple of other calls after this." As soon as we stepped inside, something wasn't right. James led and looked down. Our tool bags were sitting by the door, perfectly packed and closed. I didn't move them. I certainly didn't put all my tools up, as we weren't finished. Something didn't want us there. indirectly telling us to leave by putting everything together for us neatly. Chills ran up my spine, but Arnold didn't seem fazed, acting as if we did this to try and freak him out. And he just walked right on past it and asked me where everything was. James came back a minute later, obviously startled, but just wanted to be done. I'm going to change up the thermostat. Neither James or myself have actually been in the house. Arnold walked through the door, and inside of this second room was furniture and arcade machines, all covered in clear, dusty plastic, just like you see in the horror movies. It was very dark in this home. We flipped switches, and nothing came on, so we resorted to flashlights. Arnold went up the stairs and called out, "Ma'am, we're going to put your thermostat up." No reply, but we could hear footsteps up the stairs. I got about halfway up the stairs and turned around, paranoid that something was behind me. And sure as the world at the bottom of the steps, she was standing there, silent. Just standing there, straight and still. Her pupils almost glowed with very small white light. And then it hit us all, a smell, one I have never smelled before, but it was potent. Arnold gets up to the kitchen, flips the switch on for the kitchen, and a small overhead light over the sink turns on and buzzes, and it's on. I tapped on James' shoulder and whispered, "She's at the bottom of the steps." James' face turns pale. I knew what he was thinking. How long had she been down there? Was she hiding in that room? He leans over my shoulder and sighs. "Bro, no one's there." "What?" "I thought I just saw her, and I turned around really fast, and he was right. No one was there." I look at him. Dude, she was right there, I swear. About this time, I said that Arnold has acknowledged someone. "Hey, you must be Mrs. Brown." She was slouched over like an elderly person and replied, "Sure." I've honestly never heard someone reply to "sure" to that before. "Well, I'm gonna get this thermostat put up for you." I was still just shocked. She was right behind me. I know it for a fact. James and I walked the rest of the way up and stood in the kitchen watching them. She just stood there, staring at Arnold. Now, if you remember, I had mentioned the windows being a solid black. Well, they were covered in industrial black trash bags, taped around the window, sealed to lock out any other light source coming in. The smell was still present, and I'd never smelled it before. The odd thing was the house was clean. The tables, counters, they were all clean. Arnold finished up and turns to her and told her, "Well, you're all set up and ready to rock and roll." She just looked at him. A smile started to grow on her face that felt like it went up past her eyes. "How many kids do you have?" she asked. Her voice was strong but high-pitched, like a typical older woman's voice would be. "Excuse me?" he replied. "Well, there's Anne, Barbara, and Chuck, but there's one more, isn't there?" Arnold was completely shocked and was extremely wide-eyed and looked at me and James. As far as I knew, he had 3 kids, and yes, that was their names. How did she know? She doesn't have any electronics, no cell phones or anything to look him up. Like she could have anyways. She's never met him, and dispatch doesn't give out our names or anything like that. A darkness filled the room. It felt heavy and my heart dropped. Arnold's wife is pregnant. I can feel her. What's her name gonna be? Clara? That's what your wife picked out. And she pointed and bounced her finger at Arnold. She looked at James and he booked it down the stairs. He didn't want to know what this demented lady was going to say to him. She then slowly looked at me, and I'll never forget this till the day I die. "Marissa, Marissa, Marissa," she said. That was the name of my unborn child that died because of a miscarriage. I wanted to scream at her, but I figured she wanted a reaction out of us as she kept pushing. Arnold was silent, as was I. We both knew what was going on. Possession? Maybe a witch, who knows? But we knew we had to leave. She never made an advance towards us, like she wanted to hurt us or anything, but her posture changed. She stood up straight, smiling wickedly, barely any teeth showing, but the creases of her wrinkly smile almost touched her ears. I made a break for it. I ran down the stairs as fast as I could, stumbling once. I speed-walked to the work truck, where James sat in the driver's seat with both hands on his lap, pale and shaking. I'm sure I looked the same. I looked over at James and said, "Fuck this, go." Right as James put the van in drive, Arnold comes running past the truck, got in his van and sped off. We started driving away, and I thought to myself, did I get my tools? Was she really possessed? A million things ran through my mind in about a half a second, it felt. It was the longest drive back to the office I've ever had. We didn't collect any money for the job, which was normal procedure, but we didn't care. The next day, James called for a meeting with our manager and told him everything, from the comment she was making to not collecting the money. Our manager looked at us and just asked, "So, you didn't get collect?" James and I looked at each other, and James just asked, "Did you not hear anything I just said? She knew Arnold's kids' names, man." He laid back in his cushy office chair and said, "We'll have collections call her and finish up. Please just collect next time." Everything we had to deal with just felt like nothing to him. I suppose it did sound extreme and, well, off the wall, especially towards someone that doesn't really have any religious or spiritual views. We heard nothing about her after that. No confirmation the money was collected, nothing. James and I are still good friends today, but Arnold, well, he quit about 3 weeks after, stating that he wasn't cut out for the trade anymore, even though he had 15 years of experience. Arnold and I talk on occasion, but not about that day. I still see her sometimes in my thoughts or even in my nightmares. I'm still at the same company, but no one talks about this, just James and I. All right, that marks the end of this week's episode of Ghost Stories. I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and if you do enjoy the channel and you like true paranormal tales, please be sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell because it will let you get our stuff quicker. Thank you so much, guys. Good night and take care.